The trees of the dense Vietnamese jungle were alive, pulsating in the intense heat. The sounds of explosions and gunfire echoed through the canopy, a chaotic symphony growing more frantic by the second. In a shadow-filled valley, a small group of Viet Cong watched with contempt. They looked at the new rifle the American soldiers were using, the M16, and laughed. "A toy," one of them said with irony, clutching his venerable AK-47, rugged and massive. The fury of the conflict unfolding that day was not just another battle, it was a turning point in the history of warfare. Then, amidst the chaos, the American soldiers advanced with determination. The sound of the M16 began to echo, as if the very rhythm of the war had shifted. The rifle's high rate of fire, approximately 700 rounds per minute, turned the jungle into a stage of devastation, where surprise and fear began to take hold. An American soldier, lying in a prone position, took aim through the smoke clinging to the ground. He took a deep breath, feeling the echo of his own heartbeat. "Steady! Fire!" he yelled. The instant the words left his lips, a volley of bullets from the M16 became a powerful roar. The ground trembled under the impact as rounds tore through the air, each shot transforming the lush, fertile vegetation into a chaotic battlefield. The sound of the M16, still a mystery to many, was cementing itself as a symbol of a staggering technological leap. But the question hanging in the air was unsettling. How could something so light, something that looked like a toy at first glance, cause so much damage? As the shots echoed, the Viet Cong's rhetoric began to crumble. The one who had mocked the new weapon was now facing a new reality, a new kind of combat where initial confidence was being replaced by fear. "That toy can't touch us," a Viet Cong soldier shouted, but his uncertainty grew with every crack of the rifle. The wind blew, carrying with it the dust and the sweat that ran down the soldiers' backs. The sounds of battle became almost musical, Kafkaesque. As one Viet Cong fell back, the disbelief that American technology could truly be so powerful began to consume them. As a group of American soldiers regrouped, words of encouragement and determination flew between them. "If this toy makes them tremble, then we're going to use it every damn chance we get," exclaimed a young soldier, his eyes burning with the adrenaline of combat. The new weapon was proving to be more than just a rifle, and this reality was beginning to shape a new kind of military strategy. In the heat of battle, the jungle, with its vibrant, war-torn green, witnessed a transformation. The M16 tore a path through vines and tree trunks, displaying its deadly capabilities, while the war itself seemed to pause to make way for technological innovation. On the horizon, a young soldier, his face slick with sweat, readied himself for a new assault. The M16 was in his hands, ready to be tested in the most extreme combat conditions. With every round he fired, the jungle became a field of conflicting ideas. The Viet Cong, who once saw the M16 as a pathetic curiosity, began to question their own safety. A shadow of doubt enveloped them as they wondered, how could something that looked so fragile wield such immense power? However, this emblematic scene of combat wasn't just about firing bullets. It was the harbinger of a new era in military technology, where a toy could be as devastating as any other weapon. As the battle intensified, the war, as always, held certain truths unspoken. The potential of the M16 was slowly becoming clear, and soon everyone would be aware that what seemed like a simple rifle was a key piece in a much larger game. When the toy becomes the nightmare, the war transforms. The phrase whispered through the minds of the combatants as the sound of gunfire echoed without end. The battle, as a whole, was becoming a testament to a struggle for power, not just between men, but between the past and the future of warfare. And the jungle, with its illusory beauty, continued to be the stage for a transformation that would forever change the way wars were fought. Want to find out how this toy became a nightmare? Subscribe for more analysis. The rise of the M16 didn't happen overnight. To understand its significance, it's essential to dive into the specifications that made it a landmark in military technology. The M16, conceived by Armalite in the 1950s, emerged in a world on the brink of an arms revolution. Answering the need for a light and efficient assault rifle, the M16 was designed to be an excellent balance between mobility and firepower. The weapon used a 5.56mm caliber, significantly smaller than the 7.62mm used by the AK-47, but no less effective. Its muzzle velocity, exceeding 1,000 meters per second, allowed rounds to easily penetrate the dense vegetation of Vietnam, effectively adapting to the nature of the conflict. Weighing just 3.1 kilos, under 7 lbs, the M16 featured a power-to-weight ratio that defied expectations. Soldiers could carry more ammunition while wielding a rifle that allowed for a high rate of fire, up to 800 rounds per minute. In the end, it wasn't a simple matter of quantity, but of efficiency in combat. Veterans who first handled the M16 had mixed feelings about the new weapon. Its futuristic look and seemingly fragile design contrasted sharply with the robust rifles they were used to. Its development history was fraught with controversy and setbacks. During early tests, the M16 suffered from malfunctions. Flaws in the first versions, particularly in harsh environments, led to failures to feed and uncontrolled automatic fire. These failures began to fuel prejudice among the troops, who saw the new weapon as a potential death trap rather than a blessing. The Viet Cong couldn't have imagined how skeptical these men were about the effectiveness of their own weapons. The propaganda about their flawed toy shaped the narrative in their minds. When the M16 was finally approved for use on the battlefield, its promises were not immediately fulfilled. Its distribution to battalions was just the beginning of a complex dynamic of military adaptation and innovation. Trust, therefore, was not so much a matter of the M16's intrinsic quality, but of the resilience each soldier carried within himself. As the M16 was shipped to Southeast Asia, American soldiers found themselves in a state of tactical uncertainty. One platoon leader, Sergeant Jackson, shared his thoughts in an informal talk with his men. "For hundreds of years, we've learned a weapon is only as good as the man holding it. The real strength, that's in your hands and in your gut." This wisdom resonated with the reality of combat, as the weapon alone wouldn't guarantee victory. It was the skill and adaptability of the troops that would shape the outcome. The story of the M16 became intertwined with that of every soldier who wielded it. The naive path of hope and expectation clashed with the harsh reality of combat conditions in Vietnam. "The weapon is just one part of the equation," reflected another soldier. "The real challenge is the terrain, the climate, and the resilience of the men we're up against." The M16's efficiency seemed promising, but the battle for its acceptance and practical effectiveness was far from won. Immediately, the first operations with the M16 would reveal the true nature of this rifle and its impact on the battlefield. The distinctive crack of its report, which could have been just another noise in the jungle, would begin to tell stories of victory, but also of frustration. Many wondered, would the M16 truly fulfill its mission to reshape the fight against a determined and well-trained enemy? Tensions mounted, not just in the foxholes, but in the minds and hearts of the soldiers. The M16, a weapon that could signal a new era, also carried the uncertainty of a future at war. In a theater where the Viet Cong defied logic with asymmetric tactics, the M16 was a symbol of innovation, but also of vulnerability. The question that slowly echoed through the jungle trails was, could the Americans overcome the technical and adaptive challenges that awaited them? The M16, with all its flaws and virtues, was about to find its place in a narrative that would transcend the physical battle, testing the limits of heroism and endurance. And so the future of combat seemed woven into the promise of this new generation of rifles. Now that you know the specs, see how the M16 was forged in battle. Turn on notifications. In the heat of battle, as the sounds of explosions and bullets echoed like a distorted symphony in the jungle, the true potential of the M16 began to emerge. Examining the specifications of this innovative weapon was crucial to understanding the impact it would have on the military tactics employed by the United States in the Vietnam War. The M16 featured a modular design that allowed for versatile handling in combat. Made primarily of aluminum and plastic, its lightweight allowed a soldier to move quickly, carrying more ammunition without being weighed down. With a total length of 1,000 mm and a 508mm barrel, this rifle not only had a modern aesthetic, but also compensated for its light frame with an impressive rate of fire. The M16 could fire up to 800 rounds per minute with accuracy, providing a blanket of fire that challenged enemy operators. These specifications were not just numbers on paper, they were the essence of a new kind of warfare. The rifle was fed by 20 or 30-round magazines, allowing for a quick swap during combat. This meant soldiers could stay in the fight longer, wielding a weapon that invited continuous action. This strategy of fire saturation was a reflection of a new combat paradigm on the rise, but the M16's true capability was revealed in its 5.56mm calibration. With a muzzle velocity of 1,000 meters per second, the M16 surpassed the speed of larger caliber weapons used by the enemy, allowing its bullets to cut through dense vegetation and slice through the air with lethal efficiency. While it might have seemed less powerful compared to the AK-47, with its devastating 7.62mm round, the M16's precision and velocity made it a smart choice for combat environments filled with obstacles and cover. As soldiers adopted the M16 in operations, the impact of its features became increasingly evident. For example, during Operation Rolling Thunder, one of the first major bombing campaigns of the war, the rifle proved effective in close-quarters combat, where agility and quick reaction were essential. During an assault on a village, one soldier unleashed its capabilities, firing the M16 rapidly while moving through rubble, hitting targets before they could scramble for cover. Through the accounts of soldiers who used the M16 in combat, a new narrative began to take shape. "It was like wielding a lightning bolt," recalled one veteran. "The feeling of power, of efficiency, was palpable." This description resonated with many. The M16 quickly transformed how troops engaged the enemy, providing a renewed sense of confidence in their responsiveness. However, the M16 was not without its critics, and the comparison to the AK-47 often arose. An American soldier, watching a group of Viet Cong command a position, pondered, "They have the raw power, but we have the precision. If we can hold our ground, the M16 will be our ace in the hole." This dilemma between brute force and lightweight technology became a common theme as the war unfolded. As the war intensified, technological innovations were accompanied by adaptive tactics. American military doctrine began to incorporate the use of the M16 in strategies like search and destroy, where the weapon's flexibility allowed troops to conduct rapid incursions to eliminate strategic targets, thereby destabilizing enemy operations. Although the tactical advances and efficiency of the M16 were encouraging, the truth became more complex. Reports of malfunctions in harsh environments began to surface even among the new weapon's advocates. During one particularly treacherous mission, a soldier had to engage the enemy, but a lack of proper maintenance led to a critical failure in his weapon. These moments cost not only soldiers' lives, but also damaged the concept of technological superiority that was being promoted. Over the months, the M16 transformed from a symbol of hope to a clash of expectations and realities on a chaotic battlefield. Its impressive specs provided an edge, but the stories of failure and adaptation were interwoven, weaving the complexity of an increasingly unpredictable theater. Now that we know the M16's impressive specs and its impact on operations, how did its limits and the necessary adaptations shape the fight? Stay with us to explore it in the next battle. With every operation that unfolded in the tangled forests of Vietnam, the M16 began to reveal its true potential, but also its limitations. The war was a delicate dance between offense and defense, and the use of this assault rifle was about to be tested in increasingly challenging scenarios. It was during Operation Junction City, one of the largest military campaigns of the war, that the intersection of technological innovation and the brutality of combat would become even more apparent. In January 1967, more than 20,000 American soldiers joined South Vietnamese troops in an offensive aimed at dismantling Viet Cong guerrilla strongholds in central Vietnam. The plan was simple: deliver a decisive blow, leveraging the M16's mobility for rapid incursions, a synthesis of the new military doctrine. However, expectations would weigh heavily on the soldiers, who were preparing to face a cunning enemy, ready to exploit every weakness. In the heat of this operation, the sound of gunfire began to echo in the heavy, humid air. A sergeant wielding his M16 was at the head of his unit, his decisions carrying the weight of responsibility. "Move up! Don't stop!" With each command, he felt the adrenaline pumping through his veins. The jungle seemed alive and hostile, every leaf a potential trap. And as the soldiers advanced, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. With every step, the weight of their light artillery was a paradox. The M16, which promised agility, became a critical liability in the face of an imminent attack. Numerous accounts from that operation show how the M16's effectiveness was a double-edged sword. Soldiers reported that while its speed and precision allowed for a swift advance against the enemy, the traps and ambushes set by the Viet Cong turned every move into a potential path to death. A young private next to the sergeant, recalling the moment, exclaimed, "I could feel the confidence turning into panic. If we stopped to reload, we were sitting ducks." The pressure mounted with every shot, his faith in his weapon wavering with the instabilities of combat. As if that weren't enough, reports of technical failures began to surface. During the operation, the sergeant found himself in a hostile situation when his M16 jammed. In an instant, its potential became a burden. The need for maintenance, which until then had been downplayed by many, manifested itself with a vengeance. The distinct sound of his rifle failing echoed in his mind. "What the hell is wrong with this thing?" he screamed in desperation, looking at his comrades, who quickly realized that the supposedly revolutionary weapon could fail at critical moments. Unlike the men using the M16, who moved with agility through the battle, the Viet Cong were increasingly adaptable, using the terrain to their advantage. Far from being defeated, the enemy often withdrew into ambushes, where their guerrilla tactics proved lethal against American innovation. It wasn't just the bullets that made the M16 formidable, but its ability to be applied effectively in tactical combat. As the days of the operation wore on, the fight seemed to favor the army, but at the same time the human and material cost became evident. The pressure of war was not just a matter of tactics. Psychology became a battlefield in itself. The M16 could lay down fire, but if you're not ready for what's coming, a rifle doesn't mean a thing, reflected a veteran after days of fighting, shaken by the loss of comrades in treacherous ambushes. Thus, amidst this fierce struggle, the impact of the M16 began to create a complex narrative. It was a rifle that symbolized innovation, but also a weapon that revealed the weaknesses of military pioneering. Combat operations were shaping how soldiers viewed their weapons and their tactics. The story of Operation Junction City wasn't just about winners and losers, but about the lessons that both weapons and soldiers needed to learn on an increasingly challenging battlefield. The fight was just beginning, and each battle not only tested the technology, but also the resilience and adaptability of the men who used it. This was a constantly shifting dance, where improvisation and adaptation would become the watchwords that would shape the war in the months and years to come. How would the M16 establish itself as a fundamental pillar in the fight against the enemy? And what would that mean for the soldiers in combat? Don't miss the chance to discover the complexities of the war in the next section. The battle for survival in the jungles of Vietnam reached a new level in the spring of 1967, when the echoes of conflict grew more intense and the technological superiority of the United States was about to face a crucial test in one of the most decisive battles of the war, the Battle of Khe Sanh. What unfolded there would not only be a fight for territory, but also a critical demonstration of the M16's role as an integral part of the military narrative. Situated near the border with North Vietnam, Khe Sanh had become an American fortress. The hostile and difficult environment demanded that every soldier be at the peak of their physical and mental preparation. As they geared up for battle, the soldiers of the 26th Marines knew they were not just defending a base, but symbolizing America's determination to prevail in Vietnam. In that moment, the M16 would become an extension of the troops, a weapon that had to prove its worth under extreme pressure. In the first days of the confrontation, American forces bombarded the battlefield with unprecedented firepower. UH-1 Huey helicopters flew resupply missions, dropping tons of ammunition and equipment on the ground. The deafening sound of engines, the roar of M16s being fired, and the guerrilla artistry of the Viet Cong merged into an orchestra of destruction and chaos. In an instant, the fragility of the M16's promises became evident. While some soldiers fired with precision, others faced the challenge of ensuring their weapons were combat-ready. The fighting became intense, and the Viet Cong demonstrated their unparalleled adaptability. Using local knowledge and guerrilla techniques, they surprised American troops in well-planned ambushes. In a moment of contagious tension, a sergeant fired his M16, each shot telling a story of courage and determination. However, the M16's agility clashed with the harshness of the terrain and the psychological challenges the troops faced. "We're surrounded," he said, reflecting not only the pressure of the fight, but also the uncertainty about the future. In the battle, the M16's flaws manifested under critical circumstances. In close quarters, the need for reliability became paramount. One soldier was in the line of fire, but his weapon jammed at the decisive moment a Viet Cong soldier emerged from nearby cover. Desperation mixed with frustration, a painful reminder that innovation could not replace the need for maintenance and adaptation. "Your confidence shatters in a split second," exclaimed a veteran. The leader's response was swift. The tension at the base was palpable, misery and bravery intertwined, and what was at stake became a matter of honor. The fight at Khe Sanh embodied the intersection of technology and adaptive tactics, where the M16's awesome power contended with the cunning tactics of the Viet Cong warriors. Reports from units that were lost in ambushes due to equipment failure prompted a call to action from commanders. "Adapt or die," someone whispered to a group of distraught men. The M16 had to be more than a weapon. It had to be a symbol of hope. Eventually, even as American forces launched an intense bombing campaign in response, North Vietnam proved resilient. Despite air superiority, the effectiveness of the firepower was called into question. The technological superiority soldiers had hoped to rely on with the M16 was tested on a difficult and untamable terrain. The North Vietnamese guerrilla tactics revealed their hand, and combat operations began to shape a new narrative. Military leaders realized that modern devices were not a panacea. "We must learn from the enemy," a captain reflected in a strategy meeting. Thus, the Battle of Khe Sanh was not simply another confrontation. It became the proving ground for the tense relationship between technology and tactics. The M16, with its promises of efficiency and advancement, found itself challenged by unforeseen difficulties. Each soldier carried not just a rifle, but an idea of how a new kind of war should be fought, an idea that demanded sensitivity to unstable terrain and human adaptability. With the battlefield in constant evolution, the M16 established itself as both a powerful ally and a potential point of failure. Balancing technology and intuition became the key to survival. What would be the next move in this deadly game between innovation and resistance? Tensions escalated, and how much the Americans would learn and adapt to these circumstances would define not only the Battle of Khe Sanh, but also the future of a conflict that challenged everything the military believed modern warfare to be. Discover how the enemy's perspective affected the stakes and the consequences of this journey. As the Battle of Khe Sanh unfolded, the situation became increasingly complex. While American troops dealt with their own difficulties, the perspective of the North Vietnamese soldiers began to emerge, revealing an additional layer to the war's narrative. The context of the fight was as important as the combat itself, and the Viet Cong, under the command of a cunning lieutenant named Nguyen, were ready to exploit the perceived weaknesses of their adversaries. Nguyen observed how the latest U.S. offensive had echoed through the dense forests and jungles shaped by years of war. "They have technology, but they are still vulnerable," he reflected in a conversation with his commanders. For the men under his command, the M16 symbolized a threat, but it also revealed how the Americans were trapped in their conventional tactics. "Adaptation is our only path to victory," he asserted, knowing that a frontal assault would only expose their weaknesses to the soldiers' rapid-fire capabilities. With the Viet Cong using guerrilla warfare as their primary strategy, they moved like shadows in the darkness, hiding in the densest vegetation. The land became an invaluable ally, contrary to what the Americans had imagined. They used the terrain's features for their ambushes, confronting American troops, where the M16's firepower became more of a burden than an advantage. The M16, with its lightweight design and power, could not overcome the enemy's ability to camouflage and surprise with stealth attacks. The ambush tactics proved effective once again. On a silent night, while the battle raged in another corner of the battlefield, Nguyen and his men crept through the darkness, using their local knowledge of the terrain to ensure their attacks were precise and deadly. Every shot they fired, even in an obstructed field of view, echoed in the hearts and minds of the American soldiers. Easy targets became legends, deadly but invisible. "We're in a trap," an American soldier thought as he felt the shadow of fear approaching. His convictions about the M16's capability were challenged as the attacks multiplied. The unmistakable sound of the M16 firing was quickly overshadowed by the screams from a successful ambush. In those moments of desperation, the narrative of confidence instilled by the assault rifle became a burden, revealing the soldiers' vulnerability to each unexpected attack. The statistics began to tell a different story than expected. The Viet Cong, with over 10,000 registered guerrillas, kept up the pressure, making deaths and injuries a daily part of the field reports. The kill ratio, which the Americans expected to be favorable, proved to be increasingly balanced. The sound of the M16 represented confidence, but each shot also came at a cost. While the Americans killed, they also lost compatriots and severed ties with their own morale, proving that technology was not everything. The expectation that technological superiority would lead to a decisive success began to fade. Nguyen, monitoring the fight, observed how tactics could be adjusted in real time. "I must understand the Americans' weak point," he told himself. He knew the fight was not just a matter of firepower, but of a deep understanding of the adversary, whose responses to his actions would define the future of the Battle of Khe Sanh. As the conflict dragged on, morale became a decisive factor. The surrounded American army faced its own demons. What had seemed like a noble mission was turning into a struggle for survival. Emotional wounds became as deep as physical ones. A sergeant, worn down by days without relief, reflected on the battle not just as a combat zone, but as an existential dilemma. "If we don't learn to adapt, what will become of us?" The context of the fight showed that adapting to the opponent was not a matter of equipment, but a matter of mindset. The battle became a lesson, where both sides were forced to re-evaluate how to fight an enemy who not only fought back, but also adapted to every move. The notion that war was based on technological innovation was shaken. Nguyen and his men understood that resistance is not limited to weapons, but involves the spirit to fight and the ability to improvise. What would the Americans learn from the enemy's perspective? How would adapting to the terrain and understanding each side's ambitions shape the future of the war and the impact of the M16 on its effectiveness? Prepare to discover how the journey of technology and the struggle for survival would unfold in the next chapters of this conflict. As the Battle of Khe Sanh approached its climax, the scene grew increasingly tense. The accumulation of sleepless days and nights began to take its toll on the American soldiers. The trembling of the earth under bombardments and the constant whisper of the bullet-laden wind created an oppressive backdrop. The dense forests and jungles that once seemed treacherous were now a prison where hopes and fears intertwined. Yet on this unforgiving battlefield, there were lessons to be learned. Lessons that would shape not only the immediate outcome of the war, but also how armed forces would approach conflicts for decades to come. The M16, while symbolizing technological supremacy, had also become a painful reminder of human limitations. Its lightweight design and promise of precision faced the harsh realities of war. Studies conducted after the conflict showed that the rifle's failure rate during critical situations was between 2% and 4%. But for the soldiers who found themselves in life or death situations, these percentages were the weight of an unbearable burden. In their minds, it wasn't just weapons failing, it was comrades in whom they had placed their lives who had let them down at crucial moments. On the battlefield, the echoes of gunfire and the drumming of bombs revealed more than just the fight itself. The war became a study of the human context. As the men fought, memories of fallen friends surfaced. "What we've lost here can't be calculated in numbers," a sergeant said, remembering every face that was gone. These feelings became a new form of resistance in the face of the war's brutality. Each man in his heart processed the struggle and the pain, converting despair into strength in the face of chaos. This battle also catalyzed lasting changes in American military doctrine. The recognition of the importance of training and adaptation became clear. What the war at Khe Sanh essentially taught was that while technologies like the M16 promised modernity, real combat depended on the ability to listen to and learn from adversaries. In short, on inventive and audacious thinking. The experiences accumulated by soldiers during combat operations would become a cornerstone for future military strategies. The perception of war as a field of physical struggle was challenged by the need for innovation and creativity. Nguyen and his men, with their adaptability driven by deep knowledge of the terrain, showed that tactical flexibility could very well overcome superior firepower. They noted that even under pressure, agility and the ability to improvise became their greatest assets. Instead of just attacking, they learned to evade and create situations that rendered American technology irrelevant. As the battle finally subsided, the understanding of the M16's impact transformed into an essential reflection. In the aftermath of Khe Sanh, the United States realized that material superiority did not guarantee victory. Lives had been lost on both sides, and the casualty count was rising. It is estimated that more than 800 American soldiers were killed or wounded in combat, while enemy forces suffered equally heavy losses. The legacy of the Battle of Khe Sanh was not confined to the fertile fields of a devastated land. It extended to future generations of soldiers. Vietnam would become an example of how mutual understanding and adaptation to challenging circumstances are as important as firepower. The fight not only shaped the narrative of how a modern war would be fought, but also the standards that armed forces would adopt in the following decades, such as in the Gulf War and in the Middle East. As the troops left the battlefield, their minds haunted by memories that could never be erased, one question remained. How would the struggle for adaptation, understanding, and empathy become a hallmark of future wars? What the men learned from the scars of this battle still echoes in defense colleges and on the front lines, shaping not only military strategies but also an ideal of fighters and their weapons in a constantly changing world. Thus, the story of the M16, the fight in the Battle of Khe Sanh, and the dilemma between technology and tactics remain as testaments to what it truly means to fight a war. The struggle never ended, it just changed form, continuously challenging those who dared to enter the battlefield not to forget its lessons.